Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In our today's discussion, we are covering chapter 4 from the book Concept of Law by H.L.A. Hart. Now, in my previous videos, I have explained how Hart is basically building up his theory through criticizing Austin's work. And his main criticism with regards to the imperative theories or command theories have been laid down from chapter 2, 3, and 4. So, this is one of the last chapters in which Hart is going to criticize Austin before he starts giving his own theory. Actually, his theory is starting by the end of this lecture, and that's what I'm going to explain today, especially with regards to how he explains the notion of critical reflective attitude, the CRA, the famous CRA of Hart from which rules are created. And later on in chapter 5 and chapter 6, he completely provides his own theory, which we are anticipating for a very long period of time as we're going through this book. So I feel that Hart has put everyone on the cliffhanger, especially his readers, while defining his theory, because he does not clearly lay out his theory from the very beginning, unlike Austin. So Austin, from the very start, his first line was the matter of jurisprudence is positive law simply and strictly so called. So his, even his opening statement was very, conclusive to the extent of what he's going to talk about. But Hart does not do the same. So he lays out, the criticism for Austin, and within those criticism, as you look backwards, you find that he was actually trying to justify his own theory. He was trying to develop his own theory. And that's a very interesting way of looking at Hart's work, because जब हम initially पढ़ रहे होते हैं तो हमें लगता है कि Hart actually criticize कर रहा है Austin को, which is not the case. Actually, the case is that Hart was building up his theory from the very beginning. Let's talk about what Austin said with relations to law. We know that Austin has four features within his theory defining the term law. He calls every law as a command, and command has been subject to criticism by Hart in chapter number 2. और वो basically बताता है कि command is much wider, because command is something which is more of an accepted thing rather than coerced. And for that, he gave the infamous gunman example that we saw and read in chapter 2. Then in chapter 3, one of his second features was targeted by Hart. And the second feature of Austin's theory is sanction, because command is not completed without sanction. So what is sanction? Austin said it's slightest chance of incurring the slightest evil. But for Hart says that no, not all laws, not all rules are sanction oriented. So it's that there's a variety of law, and as the name of chapter number 3, which was my previous video. By the way, if you haven't watched that video, please make sure to watch chapter 3 first before moving on to chapter 4. So if you watch that video, you'll realize that Hart has divided laws into two broad categories. So he has bifurcated laws into two categories, and the bifurcation is between duty imposing rules, which are very similar to Austin's commands, because they do have sanctions. They have an imperative duty for you to do something, and then they provide, if the duty is not followed, they provide sanctions. On the other hand side, the next area, something that Hart adds, is the power conferring rules. And we have to remember, as we are going through each chapter, we have to remember what he has said earlier for us to understand. So the power conferring rules were those rules or principles or laws, not actually principles. I would refrain from saying principles because, well, Hart would not believe on principles. That's what Dworkin said. Dworkin is the one who follows the idea of principles. Actually, Hart believes in rules as compared to Austin, who believes in habits. So I was saying that he divided laws into two broad categories: the duty imposing rules, which I just defined, and then we have power conferring rules. So power conferring rules या laws क्या थे? They are recipes to create further obligations. They are laws that empower you. So all the laws regarding administrative law, all the laws regarding trusts and contracts and so forth, that does not directly places some sort of a duty on you, and that they do not necessarily provide some sort of a sanction, but they are more facilities given to you by the state to further create some obligations within the sphere of law. So keep that in mind. And he has been justifying how power conferring rules exist in a system and they are necessary. And he even tells through his manifestation of examples, be it the game of football example, be it the game of cricket example, or be it the game of chess example, which he's going to give now in chapter 4, that these power conferring rules play a pivotal role in shaping a legal system. So let's look at what chapter 4 is. Now, I said the first element of Austin theory is command, taken care in chapter 2. Second element, sanction, taken care in chapter 3. Chapter 3 is referred as varieties of law, so that literally signifies that he's going to talk about sanctions. Chapter 4, first let's talk about the name. The name is sovereign and subjects. And we remember back from the Austin's lecture that when we're talking about sovereign from the Austinian point of view, and that's lecture 6 of his, series of lectures in the province of jurisprudence determined, he said that sovereign has two salient features. The first one is that he's a sovereign who is a sovereign in an independent political society, one who is habitually obeyed by a bulk of population. So he used these terms. And so in chapter 4, Hart is going to play with the semantics again, playing with words, how he does that thing. So there's a lot of semantics. So he's going to pick up the word habit. So we have to even think, why did Austin use the word habit at the first place? And why did he then use the word bulk? He could have used majority or most or whatever, but he used the word bulk, and the second word is habit of obedience that the people have for that very sovereign. And secondly, that very sovereign is illimitable, which means that he said that that sovereign in an independent political society would not be habitually obeying any other human superior. That would actually make him a sovereign. So, in other words, the sovereign for Austin is not limited by any law. In words of Austin, he's illimitable. So, in chapter 4, Hart is going to target two things. He's going to target the first feature of sovereign. He's going to question the whole idea of habitual obedience. And secondly, he's going to target the whole idea of illimitability. So basically, these two criticisms are the ones that are contained in chapter 4. So let's dive into the lecture. Let's look at it and see how he develops up the whole idea of rules. I'm a bit excited how we are, going towards Hart's own theory as compared to what we have been discussing from chapter 2. So let's look at the basic idea. So Austin has stressed that wherever there is law, there is the concept of illimitable sovereign who is an essential to the society as the backbone of a man. And we remember that Austin is pretty much inspired by the work of Thomas Hobbes. As you can see on the screen behind me, that there's a picture of Leviathan, the powerful sovereign, the mighty sovereign, which Hobbes has talked about in his work Leviathan. And subsequently, Bentham, who has picked up inspiration from Hobbes, have also created the idea of a powerful sovereign within the state giving commands which are obeyed by people. So Austin believed that the sovereign is so powerful within the system that he can make laws as whatever he feels, and he's being followed because people fear him. The sovereign is characterized by the habit of obedience that is owed to him by the masses. That's the idea which Austin and people who have provided the imperative theories of law has provided. So there are two criticisms that Hart is going to raise that I've already addressed and I already talked about in my initial discussion. So Hart poses the question whether this habitual obedience can explain the first one, the continuity of law. So the continuity of law particularly is how from one sovereign to another the law keeps on moving, and so he's gonna raise some questions over that Austin, look, your theory does not provide answer of how from one sovereign there can be a shift towards another sovereign. The second criticism that Hart is going to build is the persistence of law. And these are the two headings. The first one is the continuity of law, which, of course, has a lot of information. And then the second one is the persistence of laws, laws that were originally made long time ago, how they are still laws, even when the sovereign is pretty much gone. So the person we rendered habitual obedience, he's gone. He's no more there. But why are they still laws if the person who we provided habitual obedience is no more there? So that's the two major criticism Hart is going to provide. Now, habit of obedience and the continuity of law. This is the first point within the idea of continuity of law, the first heading. और यहाँ पर हार्ट बेसिकली हमें दोबारा से एक हाइपोथेटिकल के अंदर लेके जाता है. The earliest premise of the definition for obedience is respect for authority and not merely compliance with the orders backed by threat. In order to explain this concept, Hart once again uses the aid of a hypothetical situation where he identifies an absolute monarch, Rex, who rules a community for a very long period, and the people of which obey him. Now, so let's try to understand the hypothetical that he's building. वो कहते हैं यार एक बहुत पुरानी एक सोसाइटी थी, कदीम ज़माना था, और उसमें हम इमेजिन कर लेते हैं कि एक बादशाह, रेक्स बाय द वे बादशाह को कहते हैं. रेक्स आपने शायद क्रिमिनल लॉ में देखा हो कि हम मोस्ट ऑफ द केसेस को आर वर्सेस स्मिथ, आर वर्सेस चैशायर बोलते हैं. सो आर स्टैंड्स फॉर रेक्स, विच इज़ द किंग और द क्राउन, एंड फीमेल अगर खातून होगी यानी क्वीन है उस वक्त तो उसको रेजिना बोलते हैं. सो दिस इज अ लैटिन टर्म, रेक्स एंड रेजिना. रेजिना इज द क्वीन, रेक्स इज द किंग. सो इमेजिन अ सिचुएशन, अ प्रिमिटिव कम्युनिटी, जहाँ पर एक सोसाइटी के अंदर कुछ लोग रहते थे और वो लोग जो थे उनके ऊपर एक बड़ा ताकतवर बादशाह आके बैठ गया. वो अपनी फ़ौज वगैरह लेके आया और उस फौज ने कब्जा कर लिया और उस बादशाह ने कुछ कमांड्स वगैरह देना शुरू कर दी. अब ये जो कमांड्स उसने दी उनके अंदर जाहिर है ऑस्टिन के मुताबिक ये हार्ट बोल रहा है कि ये हार्ट एक मंजर कशी कर रहा है, एक खाका हमारे सामने बना रहा है कि इस तरह से होता होगा ना कि ऑस्टिन की थ्योरी के मुताबिक जिस तरह एक सॉवरन लॉ, एक सॉवरन की कमांड है जिसके अंदर सैंक्शन है, और सॉवरन वो है जो कि हैबिचुअली ओबेड होता है और वो किसी के ऊपर पाबंद नहीं है. यही तो ऑस्टिन की थ्योरी है. तो हार्ट कह रहा है कि इमेजिन कर लेते हैं कि एक कदीम दौर है और उसके अंदर एक माशरा है, और उस माशरे के अंदर यानी एक सोसाइटी के अंदर एक सॉवरन आ गया है, एक बादशाह आ गया है, और वो बादशाह एक रेक्स जो है वो शुरू में कमांड्स देता है. लोग उसकी बात शायद नहीं भी मानते और उस बात को मनवाने के लिए वो सैंक्शंस का इस्तेमाल करता है और बहुत ज़ोर ज़बरदस्ती करके लोगों को अल्टीमेटली एक कानून के तहत यानी एक सेट ऑफ लॉज और रूल्स के तहत अपनी रियासत को कायम कर लेता है, अपनी रिट को कायम कर लेता है. अब रिट तो कायम हो गई और बादशाह जो है वो उसकी कमांड भी चल रही है. अब मसला ये आएगा कि ऑस्टिन कहेगा कि जी इवेंचुअली लोगों को खौफ की वजह से यानी फियर ऑफ सैंक्शन की वजह से लोगों की कंप्लायंस भी आना स्टार्ट हो गई. इस कंप्लायंस की जो अगली स्टेज होगी, ऑस्टिन बोलेगा, वो ये होगी कि लोग उस बादशाह को हैबिचुअली ओबे करना स्टार्ट कर देंगे. यानी उनको इन सिंपल उर्दू हम कहेंगे कि उन लोगों को उस बादशाह की कमांड्स की आदत पड़ चुकी होगी. हैबिचुअल ओबीडियंस क्या है? हैबिट का मतलब होता है आदत, यानी लोगों को कानून की पासदारी की आदत हो गई है, ये ऑस्टिन कहना चाह रहे हैं. अब हार्ट कहता है बहुत अच्छी बात है, सिस्टम बेहतरीन चल रहा था, लेकिन मेरा यहां पर एक सवाल है. हार्ट ये कह रहे हैं कि ठीक है, सारी बात समझ आती है कि भाई आपका निज़ाम शुरू हो गया, एक सिलसिला बन गया, बादशाह है, पावरफुल है, लोग बात भी मान रहे हैं. जो नहीं मानता और अगर कोई अपनी हैबिट तोड़ता भी है यानी उस कानून की पासदारी नहीं करता वो, तो उसके लिए सज़ा तो ऑलवेज मौजूद थी. सज़ा के ऊपर ही तो ये सारी थ्योरी खड़ी थी. सैंक्शन इज़ द मेन pillar on which this theory is always standing. तो ठीक है जी, सजा लगी और सारा सिलसिला हुआ. अब वो कहता है कि अच्छा, एक सवाल जहन में आता है, और वो सवाल क्या है कि सवाल ये है, अच्छा यहाँ पर ये जो मैंने पिक्चर्स रिफ्लेक्ट की हैं ना, ये सिर्फ आपके एक इमेजिनेशन के लिए. इमेजिनेशन के लिए ये है कि एक सॉवरन है, एक बादशाह है, जिसका नाम हमने क्या रखा, रेक्स. Right? So this guy, this king is very mighty, he's powerful, and he gives certain commands. And he gives commands to a lot of people, as you can see right here. He's giving commands, instructions to be followed. If not, then of course there will be sanctions to a lot of people. But then what happens is that hard questions, that imagine that he gets sick. The sovereign, the king, he's old, and so he gets sick. And while he's being sick, he ultimately passes. The question Hart raises is that how can his son sit on his father's throne? Because we were not in habit of the son. We don't even recognize the son. We were only fearful of the father. We were only following the father. And now he's gone. So what authority does the son has to sit on his father's throne? I mean, we shouldn't even be accepting him because we're not in the habit of obedience to him. So Hart begs the question that if Rex requires obedience backed by the threat of sanction, how can the obedience accorded to the Rex then have been habit imbued into it? Moreover, if all that was required to make the Rex sovereign was habitual obedience, what happens when Rex dies and Rex too succeeds to his father's throne? The mere fact that there was a general habit of obedience to Rex in his lifetime is no guarantee that Rex too will be habitually obeyed as well. Therefore, there is nothing to make Rex II the king until the people of the community develop a habit to obey him. Hence, until the people start obeying Rex II, the society will remain in the state of chaos. This is beautiful. Now, this state of chaos, he uses the word integrum. That if you're reading the Hart's book, you will find that word integrum. Very interesting word. It's that period of time where Rex I is gone, and the Rex II, which is his son, has not been able to get people to a habit. So we had a habit towards the Sovereign I, Sovereign II comes in, we're not in a habit to anyone. So Hart is asking a question, and this is a very genuine question, that what happens during this time? Kya hoga? Matlab, would we be saying that there is no law? Like all the laws, all the commands that his father, Sovereign I, who is, you can see in the picture behind me, there's a king who is in the process of coronation. He's basically giving the crown to perhaps his son. The question is, how are we going to follow this guy up? So there's no way. Because there's no such command. Because even if there is a command, there's no sanction, there's no fear. It's like asking this question. So let's try to practically understand what Hart is trying to say. We know that the independence of Pakistan and India took place in 1947, and this independence, of course, came from the colonialism after the British left. So the question is, on the night of 13th August 1947, when the Red Cliff Award was finalized, there was a line that was dividing the two states. The question is, during this time when the sovereign was so-called changing, of course, the monarch, the king of England or the queen was the sovereign at that very time before the partition took place. Now we have independent states. The question is, was there no law once the sovereign was changing the hands? The answer is there was law. There was law. Of course, those who killed during that night are still referred as murderers. Those who have raped are referred as rapists. we still know that they violated the law. But the instructions that the colonial masters gave, they have no effect. But yet there were laws. The laws were existing in the interim period. And so Hart, from here, from this point onwards, provides a solution. He says the solution is when Austin used the word habit, आदत, आदतें ना हमें अच्छी भी होती हैं और बुरी भी होती हैं. और आदत की एक खसूसियत है, आदत जिस भी चीज़ की हो उसके बारे में सोचा नहीं जाता, बेशक मालूम हो कि वो नुकसानदेह है या अच्छी है. तो ऑस्टिन इस मामले में बहुत स्मार्ट था कि ऑस्टिन ने भी सेमेंटिक्स का बहुत खुल के इस्तेमाल किया है. उसने जो लफ्ज़ इस्तेमाल किया है वो आदत का किया है, क्योंकि वो जानता था कि लोगों को इख्तियार नहीं देना चूज़ करने का राइट और रॉन्ग के अंदर. बिकॉज अगर आप एक पॉजिटिविस्ट हैं तो उसमें आप सब्जेक्टिविटी को इंक्लूड नहीं कर सकते. जब आपने लोगों को आदत लगा दी है, दे हैव नो पर्सनल बिलीफ वेदर टू एक्सेप्ट द लॉ और नॉट टू एक्सेप्ट द लॉ. दे आर डूइंग इट एज मोर ऑफ अ रेपिटेशन. इट्स लाइक अ शीप मेंटेलिटी कि एक दूसरे को ही देख देख के फॉलो हो रहे हैं, चली जा रहा है निज़ाम, उनको पता भी नहीं है. अगर एक गलत काम कर रहा है सारे पीछे उसके चली जा रहे हैं. ये है हैबिट. आदत के अंदर ना, आप आदत से जब मजबूर होते हो ना, फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर एक ड्रग एडिक्ट है, उसको ड्रग्स करने की आदत लग चुकी है, उसको मालूम भी होगा ना कि ये मेरे लिए नुकसानदेह, वो फिर भी करेगा क्योंकि वो उसको तो हैबिट है. हार्ट कहता है इस पूरी जो मसला है, मसला क्या था कि हम कैसे जवाज बनाएंगे, एक्सक्यूज बना के जो दूसरा सॉवरन है, यानी जो रेक्स 2 है, बाप की जगह उसका बेटा है, हम उस बेटे को कैसे तस्लीम कर लेंगे. कहता है इसका जो सोल्यूशन है वो है रूल्स में. ये जो डेडलॉक हमारे सामने आया कि आदत होती है कानून के अंदर, आदत शादत, हार्ट कहता है कोई नहीं होती. निजाम के अंदर आदत नहीं होती, लोगों ने ये रूल क्रिएट किया होता है. हार्ट स्टेट्स that the way out of this problem is to secure the obedience of the people through the system of rules which bridge the transaction from one lawgiver to another. कहता है ये जो दो सॉवरन्स हैं, दो बादशाह हैं, इनके दरमियान जो पुल का काम कर रहा है, जो एक ब्रिज का काम कर रहा है, वो रूल है. ये एक इस्टेब्लिश्ड रूल है कि बाप की जगह उसके बेटे ने लेनी है. In other words, Rex 1 will regulate in advance that the people must obey Rex 2 after his death. वो एक रूल क्रिएट करेगा कि मेरे मरने के बाद मेरे बेटे ने इस रियासत को चलाना है. Meaning that Rex 2 has a title to succeed to his father. He will have the right to make the law on his father's death. And when his first orders are issued, they shall become law before a habit of obedience is formed. तो यहां पर इंटीग्रम का पीरियड नहीं आएगा. वो जो एक वैक्यूम पीरियड था जिसके अंदर हार्ट के मुताबिक, ऑस्टिन की थ्योरी के अंदर, तो कोई सिस्टम ऑफ लॉ ही नहीं होगा. लॉ सीज कर जाएगा एग्जिस्ट करना, वो सिलसिला खत्म हो जाएगा. जब आपने रूल्स पहले से क्रिएट कर दिए, प्री डिफाइन कर दिए, तो जिस दिन अभी उसकी मौत वाकया नहीं हुई, अगर कमांड्स वहां से इशू होना शुरू हो गई रूल्स की फॉर्म में, तो वो एक्सेप्टेड होंगी. फॉर्म बिटवीन हिम एंड हिज सब्जेक्ट्स बिकॉज दैट इज एन एस्टैब्लिश्ड रूल. सो अब यहां पर हार्ट ने अपनी थ्योरी का एक पहला, आप कह लें कि एक इंपॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट डिस्क्लोज किया है. जिसको कहते हैं ना कार्ड्स हैं, उस तरह वो होल्ड करके बैठा हुआ था. अब उसने पहला कार्ड आपके सामने रखा है डेक में से, और पहला कार्ड क्या है कि कानून के अंदर आदत नहीं होती, हैबिट्स नहीं होती, आदतें नहीं लगी होती लोगों को काम करने की, कानून को फॉलो करने की. लोगों ने इस रूल को, याद कीजिए, कमांड इज प्राइमरीली एन अपील नॉट टू फियर बट टू रिस्पेक्ट अथॉरिटी, विच मीन्स दैट द लॉ फॉर हार्ट वॉज ऑलवेज अबाउट एक्सेप्टेंस rather than coercion. That's why he has been a strong advocate in chapter 3 that not all laws have sanctions. And I remember his words in chapter 3 precisely. He said that if I can show you that the law can exist without the fear of sanction, both Kelson's and Austin's theory will fall apart. This was the reason he was trying to justify that the law can and does have an existence without a set of sanctions. So when explaining the continuity of the law-making powers through a changing expression of an individual legislators, it is natural to use expressions like rule of succession, title, right to succeed and right to make the law. कहता है ये जो लफ्ज़ हैं, इन्हीं लफ्ज़ों से ही हमें समझ आ जाएगी कि जिस तरह से लफ्ज़ इस्तेमाल हो रहे हैं वो लफ्ज़ ही क्लियर हमें कर रहे हैं that there is a rule of succession. Most of you said कि यार it's a rule कि जी वो बाप की जगह उसका बेटा बैठेगा. तो जब रूल है तो फिर रूल और आदत में फ़र्क क्या है? दैट इज़ अ वेरी बिग क्वेश्चन. हार्ट उसी पॉइंट के ऊपर आता है इसी चैप्टर के अंदर एज ही इज़ डिस्कसिंग दिस होल इशू ऑफ कंटिन्यूटी ऑफ लॉ. तो रूल को वो समझता है कि ये क्योर है उस हैबिट का जो हैबिट ने प्रॉब्लम या डेडलॉक कॉज किया था. इट इज़ ऑब्वियस हाउएवर that with these expressions we have introduced a new set of elements, rules which cannot be explained in the terms of habit of obedience. कहता है जिस तरह से मैंने आपको ये एक नई चीज आपके सामने रख दी है, अब इसको एक्सप्लेन करना भी बड़ा जरूरी होगा. In fact, the idea of habitual obedience fails in two different though related ways which one legislator succeeds in another. Firstly, mere habits of obedience to orders given by one legislator cannot confer new legislator any right to succeed the old and give order in his place. कहता है सबसे पहला मसला क्या था कि कंटिन्यूटी के अंदर एक से आगे बात नहीं जा सकती, यानी एक सॉवरन से दूसरे सॉवरन तक पावर मुंतकिल करने का, पावर ट्रांसफ़र करने का कोई मैकेनिज्म अडॉप्टेड नहीं है, कि उसको कोई ऐसा रूल नहीं था. आदत है तो आदत एक के ऊपर थी, जिसके ऊपर आदत थी वो मर गया, वो ख़त्म हो गया, तो दूसरे को कौन कब मानेगा? यानी दूसरे को भी ऑल टुगेदर दोबारा से शुरू करना पड़ेगा, दोबारा से कमांड देनी पड़ेंगी, दोबारा से सैंक्शंस लगानी पड़ेंगी, टाइम लगेगा और फिर हैबिचुअल ओबीडियंस आएगी. ये तो हार्ट कहता है कि इस टाइम पीरियड के अंदर क्या कोई लॉ नहीं होगा तो जरूर. And secondly, habitual obedience to the old lawgiver cannot by itself render probable that the new legislator's orders will be obeyed. कहता है अगर हम ये बात मान भी लें कि पिछले के ऊपर लोग हैबिचुअल ओबीडियंस में थे, अगले की क्या गारंटी है? हो सकता है अगले के अंदर आए ही ना, तो कंटिन्यूटी तो नहीं रहेगी. इस तरह तो सिस्टम के अंदर हर वक्त ही एक रेवोल्यूशन ही रहेगी. If both the aforementioned rights and presumptions are present, there must have been an acceptance of rule which allows the new legislator to succeed the old. Now, I want you to focus on one word, and that word is acceptance of the rule. This is an important idea. He believes that the law or the rule is accepted, whereas a habit does not need any acceptance. Habit is followed just because it's repeated behavior that you need to follow, whether you like it or you don't like it. You can already foresee what problems Hart is going to suffer when he's opening up this door of subjectivity. But it's very interesting how he's building up his own theory as he's talking about that the law is accepted. Now, it depends. What kind of acceptance do we need to have for the law? And we will see that whether do we have to accept every law and how many people accept the law. Does everyone in the system has to accept the law or the rule? That's all of the points that we are going to discuss. Now, he says the difference between rules and habits, and this is very important because we need to understand how Hart distinguishes habit versus a rule. The complex social practice, he then talks about the rule following. Now, this is the normative side of Hart's work, rule following. And remember how he describes this whole idea is inspired from a philosopher, a mathematician. His name is Wittgenstein. And so Wittgenstein basically explains the idea how rule following is normatively done. Now, he believes that when it comes to rules, there is a mechanism to it that allows us to accept or reject them. And in order to understand what rule following is, he differentiates between a habit and a rule. Hart states that there are three salient differences that we need to understand. Number one, a habit is a behavior that converges. Converges कहते हैं repeat होने को. So it keeps on happening again and again. So this is a similarity. So that's the first similarity कि both habit and rule are repeated again and again. However, the deviance will not lead to criticism from the society. लेकिन जब तुम आदत तोड़ते हो ना, अब हार्ट बहुत सी एग्जांपल्स देता है, कहता है जिस तरह इंग्लिश सोसाइटी में back in the time someone had to read the newspaper in the morning. That was a habit. When you breach that habit, when you don't follow that very habit that you have created, a repeated behavior that you have created for yourself, when you breach it, there's no repercussion. In fact, there's no criticism even. Whereas when talking about rule, deviations are met with criticisms, and there will be a pressure from the society to conform. तो कहता है जब आप रूल तोड़ते हो तो उसके पीछे तो लोग बातें करते हैं कि यार आपने कितना गलत किया, आपको पता नहीं था ये रूल है और इस रूल के खिलाफ आपने काम किया. तो एक सोशल प्रेशर बिल्ड होता है कंप्लायंस के लिए. आपने ये बात जहन में रखनी है कि ऑस्टिन क्रिटिसिज्म को सैंक्शन नहीं समझता था. ये बात आपने जहन में रखनी है. पॉइंट नंबर बी, इफ a standard is not met, there will be criticism and demand for conformity, which will be considered legitimate in cases of rules. This does not happen in habits. कहते हैं जहां पर रूल ब्रीच होता है वहां पर कंप्लायंस मांगी जाती है. लोग कहते हैं कि आप इस रूल को अडहर करें, लेकिन आदतों का कोई ऐसा मैकेनिज्म नहीं है जिसकी बेसिस पे कंप्लायंस मांगी जा सकती हो. एंड इन हिज वर्ड्स ही सेज, what is necessary is that there should be a unified and a shared acceptance of rules. Now, this is purely extract from the Hart's own work, not merely as habit of obedience, but as a standard of conduct that is accepted as a guide and a basis of criticism. So that's exactly, this sums up, this line that I've extracted from H.L.A. Hart sums up the whole discussion that we are building up. Firstly, the rule is accepted, while a habit of obedience does not actually provide you with any sort of a criticism mechanism or even an enforcement mechanism through which you would keep on repeating what you're doing. So, within this, he talks about the third and the most important difference. And that difference is the internal aspect of the rule. Hart says that the third distinction is the one that has more often than not been disregarded or misinterpreted in jurisprudence. कहता है ये जो तीसरा मैं मसला आपके सामने रखूंगा ये सबसे ज़्यादा डिसरिगार्डेड मसला है और अक्सर जूरिस्ट इस मामले को देखते ही नहीं, इग्नोर कर देते हैं. This relates to the internal aspect of rule following. If you remember the old example that he gave in chapter 3 with regards to the game of cricket, and he said that there are three stakeholders while you're looking at the game. The spectators sitting outside the stadium looking at the match. The umpire who's standing within the ground who is giving instructions what to do and what not to do. And the players. And Hart said expressly that for me, it is the player whose perspective is important, which means the people who are within the system, who are following the rule, they are important to tell us why that rule exists. Under habit of obedience, this internal aspect is lost as people confer to laws only from the external element of law. बैरूनी तौर पर बाहर से बैठ के वो कानून को समझ रहे होते हैं, ये वो लोग हैं जिनका एक्सटर्नल एस्पेक्ट ऑफ लॉ है, इंटरनल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू है, एक्सटर्नल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू है. इंटरनल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू उन लोगों का है जो रूल को समझते हैं. जो बाहर बैठे हैं उनको तो आदत लगेगी. मिसाल के तौर पर उसने गेम ऑफ चेस का जिक्र करके यहां पर इंटरनल और एक्सटर्नल एस्पेक्ट को एक्सप्लेन किया है. देखिए, जो लोग चेस को जानते होंगे वो इस बात को अप्रिशिएट करेंगे कि चेस के कुछ कानून हैं और उन कवानीन के मुताबिक कुछ ऐसी मूवमेंट्स हैं जो अलाउड हैं और कुछ ऐसी मूवमेंट्स हैं जो फाउल कंसिडर होती हैं. हार्ट कहता है कि इमेजिन करो कि तुम अगर क्वीन को, वो कहता है मूविंग द क्वीन 2 spaces ahead would mean to someone who does not understand the rules of the game as mere habit, because this is an external point of view. कहता है बाहर से बैठे हुए बंदे को, जिसको ये मालूम नहीं है कि क्वीन किस डायरेक्शन में चल सकती है, बिशप्स किस डायरेक्शन में चल सकता है, फिर इसी तरह पॉन्स किस डायरेक्शन में चल सकते हैं, उनको लगेगा कि जो प्लेयर्स गेम को एक ख़ास पैटर्न के तौर पर खेल रहे हैं, उनको तो यही लगेगा कि इनको आदत पड़ी हुई है, उसको तो आदत ही दिखाई देगी, क्योंकि इन लोगों का बैरूनी व्यू है, एक्सटर्नल व्यू है, बाहर से बैठा हुआ व्यू है, ये जानते ही नहीं है कि निज़ाम अंदर क्या है। लेकिन जो लोग चेस खेल रहे होंगे उस वक्त, वो ये जानते हैं कि नहीं, पॉन ने किस डायरेक्शन में मूव करना था, अगर उसकी खिलाफ वर्जी होगी तो दूसरा या वो इंसान खुद अपने आप को क्रिटिसाइज करेगा, ओहो ये तो रूल नहीं है। और कहता है जब आप अपने आप को करोगे तो आपको अगला बंदा भी करेगा। और इस कॉन्सेप्ट को उसने किस तरह से बिल्ड किया वो आपके सामने रखते हैं, इंटरनल वर्सेस एक्सटर्नल एस्पेक्ट को। The external aspect is the regular conduct, something that is observable to those who do not know the existence of rules. ये बैरूनी जो व्यू पॉइंट है, बाहर से बैठा हुआ, उनको वो पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू है जिनको नहीं मालूम कि निज़ाम क्या है, जिनको नहीं मालूम कि सिस्टम है क्या, और वो सिस्टम के बाहर बैठ के उसको ऑब्जर्व कर रहे हैं, उसको जान रहे हैं। उनको जाहिर सी बात है, उनको ऐसे लगेगा कि एक ऐसा बिहेवियर है जो कीप ऑन रिपीट कर रहे हैं, ये पॉन्स को इसी डायरेक्शंस में मूव किए जा रहे हैं, तो उसको तो यही कहेगा कि यार ये इनको आदत है। लेकिन द इंटरनल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू इज दैट ऑफ अ मेंबर ऑफ अ ग्रुप हु एक्सेप्ट्स and uses the rules as guides to conduct and criticism. A typical statement used to express acceptance would be, we bathe here every Saturday night. हम यहाँ पर बात लेते हैं हर सैटरडे नाइट। ये है इंटरनल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, वो अपनी बात कर रहे हैं। The external point of view is that of an observer who does not accept the rules. He may be taken as a member of the group who rejects the rules, or the one who is outside the group and simply record their behavior. The typical form of an external statement would be that they bathe on Saturday night. यानी वो लोग, क्योंकि वो निज़ाम में नहीं है, वो उस पूरे प्रोसेस में शामिल ही नहीं है। यहाँ पर एक बहुत खूबसूरत फ़िक्रा जो हार्ट ने यहाँ पर हमें प्रोवाइड किया है, मैं आपको उसके सामने रखता हूँ, सॉरी ये आपके सामने रखता हूँ। वो कहता है, थोड़ा सा मैंने जूम आउट कर लिया ताकि इट इज़ मच रीडेबल। द ऑब्जर्वेबल डिफरेंस बिटवीन दोज हु मेयरली हैव हैबिट्स एंड दोज हु एक्सेप्ट रूल्स is the manifest acceptance of the rules as standards of behavior for a group as a whole. Such acceptance involves the acknowledgement of the criticisms as legitimate or justified. In other words, rule का internalization उसकी criticism के ऊपर बुनियाद रखता है, उसकी basis के ऊपर होता है। और इस पॉइंट को फिर आगे हार्ट एक्सप्लेन करता है क्रिटिकल रिफ्लेक्टिव एटीट्यूड के नाम से, कि हार्ट कहता है कि हर रूल के अंदर जो इंटरनलाइज हुआ होता है एक CRA है, क्रिटिकल रिफ्लेक्टिव एटीट्यूड। ही सेज दोज हु आर अवेयर ऑफ द गेम एंड इट्स रूल्स हैव अ क्रिटिकल रिफ्लेक्टिव एटीट्यूड। वो लोग जो चेस की गेम को जानते हैं, उनका एक इंटरनल एस्पेक्ट होगा, और वो इंटरनल एस्पेक्ट क्रिटिकल रिफ्लेक्टिव एटीट्यूड की बुनियाद पर बना होगा। दैट मैनिफेस्ट्स दैट द इंटरनल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू टुवर्ड्स रूल फॉलोइंग। व्हेन दीज रूल्स विल नॉट बी फॉलोड, इट विल बी मेट विद क्रिटिसिज्म फ्रॉम दोज होल्डिंग एन इंटरनल एस्पेक्ट और इंटरनल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू। आप जब उस रूल को वायलेट करेंगे, गेम ऑफ चेस का वो जो रूल जो अंडरस्टैंड किया जा रहा है, आप उसको जब वायलेट करेंगे तो सबसे पहले जिन लोगों का इंटरनल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू है वो उसको क्रिटिसाइज करेंगे। व्हाट हार्ट इज ट्राइंग टू से इज दैट पीपल कैन एक्सेप्ट रूल्स विदाउट कंपल्शन। What is necessary is that there should be a critical reflective attitude to a certain pattern of behaviors, and this should display in its self-criticism, including self-criticism, demands from conformity, and acknowledgement that these demands are legitimate. Now let's try to understand what he's trying to say with critical reflective attitude. वो कहता है जब भी कोई रूल एग्जिस्ट करता है, उस रूल के पीछे, क्योंकि रूल वो एक्सेप्टेड होता है, उसमें कोवर्जन तो है नहीं, वो तो रूल माना हुआ है ना आपने। एक्सेप्टेंस का जिक्र तो उसने पिछली कोटेशन में भी किया ना आपके सामने, दैट सच एज एक्सेप्टेंस आपके सामने था। पूरा निज़ाम वो एक्सेप्टेंस के ऊपर बेस करता है। अब यहाँ पर भी वो यही बात कर रहा है कि CRA जो है, क्रिटिकल रिफ्लेक्टिव एटीट्यूड जो है, वो इंटरनलाइज होके एक्सेप्टेड एक रूल क्रिएट कर रहा है। और वो एक्सेप्टेंस किस बेसिस पे डेवलप हुई है? वो एक सेल्फ क्रिटिसिज्म स्टार्ट, उसकी बुनियाद कहाँ से है? अपने आप को सबसे पहले जवाब दे करना। यानी आपने सेल्फ अकाउंटेबिलिटी की बुनियाद पर कानून को सबसे पहले लागू किया। और उस सेल्फ एक्सेप्टेंस के बाद, यानी जब आपने खुद अपने आप के ऊपर ये तस्लीम कर लिया, यार ये कानून है, इसको मैंने गलत किया तो फिर मैं गलत कर रहूंगा, कहता है इसके बाद फिर सोशल क्रिटिसिज्म आता है उसी रूल के ऊपर जिसको इंटरनलाइज किया गया होता है एक माशरे के अंदर। अगर उसको आपने वायलेट किया तो उस रूल के ऊपर सोशल प्रेशर बिल्ड होगा, सोशल प्रेशर। और अल्टीमेटली वो सोशल प्रेशर कहां चला जाएगा? अल्टीमेटली वो सोशल प्रेशर जाएगा इनटू अ नॉर्म। नॉर्म बन के वो एक लीगल नॉर्म भी बन सकता है, एक कानून भी बन सकता है, और उसकी पीछे सजा भी लगाई जा सकती है क्रिटिसिज्म से। लेकिन जो पॉइंट ऑफ ओरिजिन है वो सेल्फ क्रिटिसिज्म है, फिर सोशल क्रिटिसिज्म, फिर वो लॉ बन सकता है। इन वर्ड्स, इन हिज फेमस वर्ड्स, he there's a beautiful quotation that I would like to go over here again. He says, what is necessary is that there should be a critical reflective attitude to a certain patterns of behavior as a common standard, and this should display in its self-criticism, including self-criticism, demands for conformity, and acknowledgement that such criticisms and demands are justified. So, page number 57, this quotation explains the whole idea of critical reflective attitude. Now, there are, of course, many questions with regards to the critical reflective attitude. Before I move ahead, मैं थोड़ा सा ना यहाँ पर ही पसंद करूँगा कि मैं critical reflective attitude को भी थोड़ा सा क्रिटिसाइज कर लूँ। पहली बात तो ये है कि जब आपने इंटरनलाइजेशन की बात करना स्टार्ट कर दी हार्ट साहब, तो आप लोगों की एक्सेप्टेंस के ऊपर आ रहे हो। और जब आप लोगों की एक्सेप्टेंस ऑफ लॉ के ऊपर आ रहे हो तो लोग तो एक्सेप्टेंस करेंगे अपने पर्सनल बिलीव्स के ऊपर और सब्जेक्टिव थॉट प्रोसेस के ऊपर, विच मीन्स दैट यू आर इंक्लूडिंग मोरालिटी इनटू द सिस्टम while you are claiming to be a positivist. फुलर और फिनिस ने यही आर्ग्यूमेंट किया हुआ है और उनका यही पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू है कि सर आपका जो ओरिजिन ऑफ लॉ है, यानी जो क्रिटिकल रिफ्लेक्टिव एटीट्यूड है, वही एक मॉरल रूल है। दिस एटीट्यूड इज अ मॉरल रूल। तो जब ये मॉरल रूल है तो आप अपने आप को पॉजिटिविस्ट कैसे क्लेम कर रहे हैं? आप तो फिर एक नेचुरल लॉयर हुए ना। नंबर टू, नील मैककॉर्मिक कहता है कि ये जो क्रिटिकल रिफ्लेक्टिव एटीट्यूड है, इसमें से हम क्या चीज़ पहले डेवलप करते हैं? डू वी बिकम क्रिटिकल फर्स्ट एंड देन हैव अ रिफ्लेक्टिव एटीट्यूड, और डज द एटीट्यूड इज फॉर्म्ड बिफोर, देन वी रिफ्लेक्ट ऑन दैट एटीट्यूड एंड देन वी अल्टीमेटली बिकम्स क्रिटिकल ऑन इट? So that means it's the other way around. We are never critical about something. अब यहाँ पर नील मैककॉर्मिक भी हार्ट के साथ एग्जैक्टली वही कर रहा है जो कि हार्ट ने ऑस्टिन के साथ किया है, विच इज सिमेंटिक्स, लफ्ज़ों को आगे पीछे कर रहा है। तो वो बड़ा एक जेन्युइन क्वेश्चन है कि यार पहले कौन सी चीज़ आती है? पहले आपका एटीट्यूड डेवलप नहीं होता एक चीज़ के बारे में, मतलब आपका एक पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू डेवलप होता है ना कि यार ये चीज़ सही है नहीं है, उसके बाद आप उसको रिफ्लेक्टिवली क्रिटिकल होते हो या नहीं होते कि यार ठीक है गलत है जो भी है। बट वाई आर यू कॉलिंग इट क्रिटिकल रिफ्लेक्टिव एटीट्यूड? दैट सिग्निफाइज द फैक्ट दैट क्रिटिकल पहले हो जाते हो आप, एटीट्यूड बाद में डेवलप होता है। ऐसे तो नहीं होता, राइट? सो दिस इज अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू विच नील मैककॉर्मिक हैज लेड डाउन। बट हम आगे जाके और भी क्रिटिसिज्म के ऊपर ऑफकोर्स एक पूरा सेपरेट वीडियो बनेगी, पूरा लेक्चर होगा कि हार्ट के अपनी थ्योरी के ऊपर क्या क्रिटिसिज्म है। अभी तक तो हार्ट साहब ने ऑस्टिन को काफ़ी ज़्यादा अंडर द बस दिया हुआ था ना। द रियल क्वेश्चन इज कि हार्ट साहब जब अपनी थ्योरी प्रेजेंट करेंगे तो उसके अंदर क्या जो मसले आएंगे वो उसको कौन फिर केटर करेगा? वो भी तो बहुत बड़े मसले हैं। खैर वो आगे जाके हम देखेंगे। अभी इसका जो दूसरा मसला जो उसने ऑस्टिन की थ्योरी के ऊपर रेज किया था, और वो कंटेंट ऑफ लॉ, सॉरी कंटिन्यूटी ऑफ लॉ, यानी जो उसका पिछली हेडिंग थी जिसके अंदर उसने रेक्स 1 रेक्स 2 का जिक्र करके क्रिटिकल रिफ्लेक्टिव एटीट्यूड को बिल्ड किया है। इसका जो अगला मसला है वो परसिस्टेंस ऑफ लॉज के ऊपर है। परसिस्टेंस ऑफ लॉज क्या है? परसिस्टेंस ऑफ लॉज तो ये है ना, यानी एक सॉवरन से दूसरे सॉवरन तक कैसे मामला चलता जाता है, निज़ाम का तसलसल कैसे होता है, कंटिन्यूटी कैसे होती है। सो यहाँ पर हार्ट एक मिसाल देता है, कहता है केस हुआ था आर वर्सेस डनकन, और ये 1944 का केस है जहाँ पर एक खातून जो थी, शी वॉज प्रोसिक्यूटेड एंड कन्विक्टेड फॉर टेलिंग फॉर्च्यून्स इन वायलेशन ऑफ द विचक्राफ्ट एक्ट 1735। 1735 का एक एक्ट है विचक्राफ्ट एक्ट, बड़ा पुराना है। कि वो लोग जो फॉर्च्यून टेलिंग करते हैं, किस्मत के हाल बताते हैं, क्योंकि क्रिश्चियन लॉ के मुताबिक आपको पता है वो भी उनके दीन के अंदर इसकी गुंजाइश नहीं है, तो यानी जादू वगैरह करते हैं और उसकी बुनियाद पर कोई अगर करेगा तो उसको सज़ा होगी। तो एक ऐसा कानून जो कि 300 साल पहले तकरीबन बना हुआ था, उसके ऊपर इम्प्लीमेंटेशन कैसे 300 साल बाद हुई। दिस is an illustration of how a statute enacted 3 centuries ago can still be good law. The question that arises is how can the law made by an earlier legislator long dead still be law for a society that cannot be said to have habitually obeyed? भाई उनकी तो औलादों की औलादों की औलादें आ चुकी होंगी ना, उनको तो पता भी नहीं होगा कि किस सॉवरन ने, किस पार्लियामेंट ने ये लॉ बनाया था. But why is it still law? The answer to this lies in the idea of substituting a simple habit of obedience to currently accepted fundamental rules which govern the right to legislate and describe the persons who have the right. What Rex 1 declared to be the rule and survived his lifetime shall be adopted by Rex 2 and Rex 3 and so on and so forth. So when Rex 1 dies, his legislative work lives on for the rest of upon the foundation of the general rule which successive generations continue to respect. So this is how Austinian theory works. But one thing that we have to remember is that both Austin and Bentham never considered sovereign as an individual, as someone who was present only for a time being. Bentham and Austin have defended the idea of habit of obedience integral in the persistence of laws by stating that the law passed by Rex 1 is obeyed by Rex 2 because the tacit approval of the law by Rex 2. So, one of the beautiful lines that even Austin has rephrased, or actually not rephrased, he has quoted them in his lecture 6. He says, the sovereign is not who, from whose authority the law was made, but from whose authority the law continues to be the law. Now, so that means that it's not someone who made the law, that is the parliament in 1935, but from the subsequent parliament in 1944, once that parliament has tacitly approved all the laws that were made prior to it, makes it the law, which means that the sovereign has to agree or legislate or approve of some of the laws that will exist, even according to the Austinian point of view. Even though Rex 2 could change the laws, he does not do so in order to breed familiarity and continuity. Remember, with regards to habitual obedience, Austin states that the requirement of habitual obedience is rendered towards an institution and not to the monarch or individual. So, yeah, we do remember this point that for Austin, I think Hart is not doing fair by saying that, well, your sovereign is a person. Not really. Austin always maintained that it is an institution, which means it's more like a parliament, and so parliament is there. It keeps on changing the people, but the parliament is there. So people have habitual obedience towards the parliament, not to the people who are sitting MPs right now as member of parliament. The last point is with regards to illimitability. So illimitability has been a subject to debate by a lot of people, including Hart. And this is something that I personally believe is a legitimate criticism. Austin said that the sovereign, the independent political sovereign, is not bound by any earthly being. This is absolutely not right. Hart considers illimitability of the sovereign. Hart is of the opinion that the sovereign can and is challenged. To support his claim, he gives the examples of substantive limitations, and in particular those found in the United States of America, where the division of powers between the central government and also the certain individual rights cannot be changed by the ordinary process of legislation. वो कहते हैं कि यार देखो, पार्लियामेंट को भी एक पाबंदी है कि सिंपल प्रोसेस ऑफ लेजिस्लेशन से फंडामेंटल राइट्स को ख़त्म नहीं किया जा सकता. इनफैक्ट जितने भी कंट्रीज़ हैं जिसमें कोडिफाइड कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है, वहाँ पर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन सुप्रीम होता है, पार्लियामेंट भी सुप्रीम नहीं होती, हालांकि उसी पार्लियामेंट ने कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को बनाया होता है. यानी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ने पार्लियामेंट के ऊपर, जो कि जिसको हम फिर भी सॉवरन कहते हैं, उसको के ऊपर भी एक लिमिटेशंस प्लेस की हैं कि भाई आप बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के खिलाफ कानून नहीं बना सकते. एनी अटेम्प्ट टू चेंज दीज is to be considered ultra vires and declared legally invalid by the courts. The most famous example is the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America. This provides inter alia that no person should be deprived of liberty or property without the process of law. Statutes of Congress have been declared invalid by the courts when found in conflict with these. I think a prime example can be seen in Pakistan. An example was that when the issue of a lot of extremism took place back in the time when the APS incident happened in 2014. So there was a huge insurgency wave that was going through the entire country. So the legislator decided at that time, the parliament decided, all parties decided, even the opposition was part and parcel of that we should have military courts. And for that very purpose, they made a 21st Amendment to the Constitution. And that very law, because it violates the whole process of trichotomy of power, how can the executive be playing a judicial role? The executive is the watchguard of the law. They ensure that the law is to be followed, but not to adjudicate the law. So this was a conflict that was created back in time. And so the Supreme Court, in one of its wonderful judgment rendered by the full court, 15 judges ruled upon that. The judgment is called Rawalpindi Bar Association versus Federation of Pakistan. It's in Supreme Court 2015. It's a reported judgment, page I think 401. Now that judgment talks about that in states like Pakistan, where there's a written constitution, it's not the parliament who has made the amendment, which is absolutely supreme. It's the constitution. And they said even something more important. They said there is constitution and there is something called as the basic structure of the constitution, or in other words, the spirit of the constitution. यानी एक आइन है और एक आइन की रूह है, और आइन की रूह के अंदर separation of powers is one of those concepts जो आइन का basic structure है उसके अंदर embedded है. So उसको अगर आप violate करेंगे तो that can be questioned, that can be challenged before the courts, and the courts can declare it ultra vires. ये कहना भी यहाँ पर ज़रूरी होगा. कोर्ट ने उस वक्त उस तरमीम को एक certain duration के लिए allow किया था because of the unprecedented circumstances that we had at that time. But in other words, that judgment basically tells that even a constitutional amendment passed by the sovereign legislator can be questioned and can be challenged if it is against the very constitution, which means that there are limitations on the constitution. There are limitations on the parliament as well, that you can't make anything law. You see the whole idea of A.V. Dicey, that kill all blue-eyed babies. It's just existent in theory. It can't be practically done. Of course, the parliament cannot be limited. In UK, there's a convention that no parliament can bound the future parliament, right? But at the same time, the parliament would not be allowed to make laws that are so contrary to the general accepted rules. Let's say the UK Parliament decides that, well, there would be no right of fair trial, which means the government can arrest people and then they can send them to prison for their lives if they feel like. So let's say they pass this law, because all that needs for the UK law process or UK lawmaking process is the simple act of parliament. So any government having 51% of the majority can pass an act of parliament. So let's say they make that law. But in most circumstances, because of the international pressures, the international covenants and conventions and the EU and the ECHR, there will not be this possibility, is not in practice practically there. So he says that most of the sovereigns, they have made laws for themselves, and not all laws are like limitation laws. They're laws that actually give or empower the sovereign himself, and that's a power conferring rule. So there's no idea of illimitability. And so that brings us to the whole summary of this chapter. Hart says that social rules involve a standard accepted by some members of the social group, and the idea of a rule is better at explaining the law than the hierarchical one-off nature of order. backed by threat, as he infamously calls it. Rules allowing for the distinction between legal duties and powers can account for the fact that laws apply to the institutions that make them, and explain why there are some laws that do not appear to have any particular origin, such as customary law. So, obviously, customary law, according to Hart, is a valid rule because it's the law that is most accepted. It's being most followed, and that's why he was building up in chapter 3 as well, that the mode of origin, जहाँ पर उसने बात की थी कि custom is one of the biggest mode of origin of the law, right? And this is how he summarizes this entire discussion. So he doesn't, again, that you can see in chapter 4, he doesn't provide his own theory. He's just introduced the idea of rules, trying to replace the idea of habits through this process of rules. And he says that the rules are there because they're internalized, they are accepted by the people who follow them. And that's the internal aspect of rule following. So that's an interesting thing. Of course, this conversation cannot be completed unless and until we know chapter number 5 and chapter number 6, which I'll make separate videos for. So I hope you've understood chapter number 4, the whole idea of sovereign and subjects, and with regards to continuity of law and persistence of law. I hope if there's any questions that you guys have, please do place them in the comment sections. If you have any views of your own, you can also comment on that. Thank you very much, guys, for watching this. Please take care of yourselves.